Go get him.
Thank you, Pat, and thanks to all of you. Thanks to Dominic, and thanks to all of you for inviting me here today. What an honor it is to be here at Tax Watch. What an honor it is to be here to talk about the things that we care about here in this great state that's succeeding, that's showing the way for a country that's in some ways lost its way. You know, it's funny when I talk to my old friend Pat Neal about Tax Watch. Why is he involved in this? He's involved in this because he's a patriotic American who understands that there's no boundary tropic activity in your business. It's amazing this well-run state with political activity that's productive and that's positive. We're talking about a tax regime that's efficient, that allow people here to start businesses, make it possible for people to make their livings. And what do they do when they get here? They have to have some place to live. Who's built more houses in Florida than Pat Neal? No one. The whole point is we're looking for quality of life for people. We're looking for quality of life for people who are the answer to, oh boy, there we go. To a country that's looking for answers. And this is a place that they can look. This is a place of inspiration for people all over this country. Congratulations to you for being part of this. Now, it's great to see a lot of old friends. I was spent a little bit of time this morning with Al Hoffman. Where's Al? Al's here? First thing when Al saw me is he said, "That's a nice Sears and Roebuck suit you got on there." I'm going to take that as a compliment. I'm not sure what it means, but I'm sure it's a compliment nonetheless. And I've been an admirer of Tax Watch for a long time. You're doing important work, as I mentioned before. When we're talking about the types of public policies that you're most interested in, we're talking about old problems that need new solutions. As you heard, that I was the president of a think tank for a long time. Now I'm a professor of public policy at Harvard University. And one of the key things to understand about public policy is when you have an old problem, it's not going to be solved by thinking harder in the old way. You need a new way. You need a breakthrough. You need an epiphany to figure out how to solve old problems. You know, you all know this to be true because you've experienced epiphanies in your life. Your people are successful in your jobs. You're the leaders in your communities. So just think of a time when you had a big breakthrough to solve an old problem. I was reminded recently by my wife of a big one in my own family life. I have 3 kids, ages 22, 20, and 17. Pray for me. And when my middle son was still in high school, we were having a lot of problems with grades. Some of you can relate to this. His name is Carlos. Carlos is a good boy. He's about to ship out to basic training for the U.S. Marine Corps. But when he was in his senior year in high school, yeah. But when he was in high school, boy, we didn't know what the future was going to hold. And we were having a very terrible parent-teacher conference one day. It was this grades problem. Is he going to graduate? What kind of future does he have? And it was an old problem, an ongoing problem. Again, going on for year after year, not living up to his potential. We'd harangue him, nothing. So we left this parent-teacher conference, and we got in the car, and there's kind of this icy silence. And my wife, who's an optimist, she's from Spain, and she said, "You know, this is an old problem." And I said, "It sure is." She said, "We need to think about it in a new way." And I said, "I'm all ears, sweetheart." She said, "At least we know he's not cheating." That's the spirit in which I want to talk about what I think is the biggest problem we have in America today. I want to talk to you about what I think is tearing our country apart, but not to lament the problem, but to find a solution. And if I do my job in the next 25, 30 minutes, I'm going to empower each person in this room to be an agent of change in this community, in this state, in this country. Why? Because you're leaders. You just need to know the new way to go about doing business. And I'm going to do my best to give that to you. What is the big problem? The problem is that we're being torn apart over our ideological differences. We have Democrats in here, we have Republicans in here, we have conservatives in here, we have liberals in here. What we're all concerned about is a better tax policy environment, of course. But what you love is your community and your state and your country. How come we can't make progress? That was on my mind in 2014 I was doing what I always do. For a living, I travel around to give speeches. When I was running the American Enterprise Institute, my job was to give 175 speeches a year and raise $50 million a year. So it's just like, yeah, thanks. I mean, it's like, that's an applause line for Pat Neal. That's like running for the Senate and never getting elected. And I was on the road in February of 2014. I remember it because I was reading an article in a journal that I like to read called The Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. I'm a nerd, that's what I read. It's the best science journal for non-scientists in the country. And it's a very profound article by 3 social psychologists about something called motive attribution asymmetry. What's that? That's a case in which when you have an intractable conflict between groups of people, it's almost always because each of them sees themselves as motivated by love, but the other side is motivated by hatred. That makes hostility impossible to solve. Look, if I'm motivated by love and you're motivated by hatred, we got nothing to talk about. I'm good, you're bad. And when both sides think that, you're going to have permanent conflict. Now, why did this article get my attention? They talked about the Balkans and the Rwandan genocide and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Here's why it got my attention. In 2014, these 3 authors looked at the data and found that Democrats and Republicans in America have the same level of motive attribution asymmetry as the Palestinians and Israelis. Think about that, my friends. The level of hatred between right and left in America in 2014 was measured to be the same as in Israel between Arabs and Israelis. That, my friends, is a huge problem for our country. It's probably not true for you and your friends. It's certainly not true in this room. We got the data showing that that's what's tearing us apart. That's an error. Why is it an error? Because both sides can't be motivated simultaneously by love and hatred. One side's wrong, or probably both. So this is on my mind. This is before the 2016 election. I'm not traveling around the country thinking about this for the next couple of months. We have a big problem coming, I thought to myself. And then I saw an example of it that kind of spurred me to action. 2 months later, doing what I always did, I would go night to night, I would talk in different places. You know, I'll talk any place, to anybody, any group, any ideology, I don't care. If I get to talk about ideas with smart people, I'm on board. I talk at really left-wing universities and I talk about really conservative activist groups, I don't care. It was in this latter category. In Manchester, New Hampshire, in April of 2014, I was discussing policy ideas at an activist conference of Tea Party patriots with 600 people in attendance. Manchester, New Hampshire. Okay, really fired up. Conservative activists. I got there a little bit early. I looked at the program, and I was the only person on the program not running for president. There were a lot of candidates in those days. 15 presidential candidates and me. I thought, this is a mistake. And I thought, there aren't any mistakes, only opportunities, right? I don't have to tell you, it's a group of entrepreneurs and successful people in the world of business. Only opportunities. So what's my opportunity? Well, let's think. What can I do that the politicians can't do? When you go to a place where a bunch of people are running for president, what do? They get in front of a completely sympathetic group, and they say 2 things. You're right, and the people who disagree with you are stupid and evil. That's what they do. If you look at all the presidential rallies that are going on today, with all the people who are running for president in 2020, that's what they do. Now, God love them. I'm not a politician. I don't have to do that. I'm not going to criticize. That's just a fact. So I knew this was what was going to happen, and I listened to a few speeches, and sure enough, and I thought to myself, you know what I can do? I'm the only one in this room who can say exactly what I think. So I did. In my speech, I got up and I said, my friends, you've been hearing a lot of things that you've been applauding, a lot of ideas you agree with, and in point of fact that I agree with too. But I want you to remember the people who don't agree with these ideas. People who are not in this room because they wouldn't feel comfortable in this gathering. They're people who think that these policy ideas are incorrect. Who are they? They're liberals. They're Democrats. They're progressives. And I want you to remember one important thing. They're not stupid and not evil. They're just Americans who disagree with us on public policy. And if you want to persuade them of your point of view, which you should, there's only one way that you can do it. With love. It was not an applause line. But there was an applause line. It came right after that. See, this lady in the audience yells out, "I think they're stupid and evil." Now, it didn't hurt my feelings because she wasn't trying to hurt my feelings. She was making a joke. Not a great joke, but it was a festive environment. She was among her friends. Here's the reason I remember that. It gave me a little bit of insight. First, I thought, wow, that's motive attribution asymmetry. I'm motivated by love, and they're motivated by hatred. It was a perfect example. It was an encapsulation of this principle I'd been thinking about. Second thing I thought was, well, that's very impractical as a strategy because nobody in history has ever been insulted into agreement. You're not going to persuade anybody that way. You're not going to basically spread your message. The third thing, and this was most important that I thought at that moment, my mind went to Seattle. Why Seattle? Because it's my hometown. I grew up in the most politically progressive city in America. My father was a college professor, and my mother was an artist. What do you think their politics were? My own politics are free enterprise, center-right, right? I'm the black sheep of my family. I'm the oddball. I'm the one at the Thanksgiving table who has the different point of view. Some of you are that person too, and you know how it feels, right? You know what it felt like in my family? It was fine, because my parents loved me. Now, they raised me with good values. They raised me in a Christian home. My parents raised me to think for myself, which I did at great inconvenience to them. They were not stupid and not evil, even though they disagreed with me. And when that lady said that in New Hampshire, she was talking about my mom. And I took it personally. Now, I wasn't mad at that lady, but it made me remember something that I'd learned as a kid, and that you learned as a kid too, which is the mark of moral courage. It's not standing up to the people with whom you disagree. That's good, that's fine. Stand up to the people with whom you disagree, but that's not moral courage in a free country. In a free country where you can say anything you want, you can post on the internet that you dislike the President of the United States, and there's no knock in the night, and there's no jackbooted thug. God bless America. In a free country, moral courage is standing up to the people with whom you agree on behalf of those with whom you disagree. That's hard to do, standing up to your friends. And yet you know perfectly that in a country that's being torn apart by polarization, that's exactly what we need to do. So how are we going to do it? How does it start here? I'm not asking you to compromise your principles or change your views. I'm certainly not going to, unless somebody makes a case. But I am saying that unless we're fighting for the people who disagree with us, but who are Americans just like us, we're never going to come back together. And it starts with leaders, so it starts right here. How? I'm not doing my job unless I tell you how we can do it. See, this big epiphany for me kicked off the movement to write a book called Love Your Enemies, which I published last March. And I want to tell you what I found over the course of that research, because I think I found the answer. I think I figured out how to do it. And I'm going to see whether or not you agree. Now, to begin with, let's think a little bit about this motive attribution asymmetry problem. What kind of lies behind it? Why would we get to this point in American life where we would have this attitude about each other? I'm motivated by love, but you, the other, someplace is motivated by hatred? It's crazy, you know? How could we think such a thing? I was pondering that the next night after my fateful experience in New Hampshire. I was someplace else in Kentucky or West Virginia or wherever. And I thought to myself, I wonder if people actually feel that way about their loved ones. So I asked the audience, I'm going to ask you right now, the only time I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. How many of you love somebody with whom you disagree politically? I'm going to round that off to 100%. The rest of you are on your phones. Okay then. You see what a big problem this is when we have a motive attribution asymmetry problem, when we're talking about the other, the people who are stupid and evil, those who are completely wrong, and yet we love them? Why would we let some talking head on television, some politician trash our sister-in-law? Why would we do that? That's ripping apart the fabric of our communities and actually tearing apart our own values. What lies behind it? Now, people often say, there's just a lot of anger in our country. There's a lot of anger in the wake of the financial crisis. There's a lot of anger because of the differences that we have politically. I wish that were true. Why? Because anger is something that we can deal with. Anger is a hot emotion that says, I care what you think and I want to change it. Right? There's a lot of literature out there in the world on marital reconciliation that shows that marriage is uncorrelated, or divorce is uncorrelated with anger. Anger and divorce are not correlated. As I mentioned before, I'm married to a Spaniard. And the secret to my 28 years of marital bliss is the lack of correlation between divorce and anger, let me tell you. So what's correlated with divorce? Maybe we can understand something about this marital problem that we're having in America. If we can get to the bottom of that. I asked a friend of mine, his name is John Gottman. He's the world's leading expert in marital reconciliation. He runs the Gottman Marriage Laboratory in the University of Washington's Department of Psychology. He's a very distinguished guy. Many of you have read his books. I had him on my podcast, as a matter of fact. And I said, John, why is it, if anger is uncorrelated with divorce, that people get divorced? He said, it's because you take anger and you take that hot emotion and you mix in disgust. And you turn it ice cold. Then it becomes something called contempt. So what's contempt? Contempt, according to Arthur Schopenhauer, the great 19th century philosopher, is the conviction of the utter worthlessness of another person. Let me say it again. The conviction of the utter worthlessness of another person. Treat your spouse with contempt. The thing you just said is totally worthless, and so you are totally worthless. Whether you state it as such or not, how hurtful is that? He says that when he sees signs of contempt, he's waiting for divorce court. He claims that he can counsel a couple that's quarreling, and in 5 minutes after meeting them, he can predict with 97% accuracy if they will be divorced within 3 years. I said, John, what are you looking for so I can not do that? You know what he said? Eye rolling. Eye roll. The universal sign of contempt. Some of you have teenage kids like me. They roll their eyes so hard they get like they're going to fall backwards in their chairs, right? That's different. That's just expression for kids, right? But when it's your spouse, when it's your coworker, when it's your friend, when it's somebody who owes you love and respect and esteem, you never quite forget it, do you? It's not just the eye rolling, it's the sarcasm, it's the derision, it's the dismissal. You say something you really believe and somebody's like, really? I can't believe it. Ugh. That's what makes Thanksgiving dinner misery for so many people. Oh, my Aunt Marge, she's a socialist. I know what she's going to say. My Uncle Joe, what a right-winger. Can't stand it. It's not because Marge is a socialist and old Uncle Joe is a conservative. The reason is because there's contempt at that table. That's what tears couples apart. That's what tears families and friendships apart. That's what tears America apart. Have you ever rolled your eyes when you heard something you disagree with politically? Oh yeah, has somebody done that to you? Is that what politicians do in debates? Is that what you see on your favorite news network? Non-stop, my friends. This is a country with a culture of political contempt. I was doing a little research on this and I thought to myself, well, let's go back and see if I'm guilty. Why not? Went on YouTube, which is a perilous journey, looking for clips of myself on television. I do a lot of TV. And I saw myself doing a debate with this nice lady about the minimum wage. And, the minimum wage is a very controversial policy. But let me tell you something, as an economist, the one thing I like about the minimum wage is that the impetus is to make work pay. Morally, we should always make work pay. That's great. The problem with the minimum wage is that it tends to cut the bottom rung off the ladder of opportunity. In other words, it's a good motivation, but it's a bad execution. You need a better policy. So I'm not against the idea philosophically. I'm just against that policy because I don't think it does the trick for our poorest brothers and sisters. Okay, that's the case I was trying to make when I was looking at this clip of me on CNN having a debate with a lady on the other side of the issue. She made what I considered to be an ill-conceived remark. You know what I did? I rolled my eyes. My friends, I'm guilty as charged. When I say we need to break the habit of contempt, I'm saying I need to break the habit of contempt. I'm a sinner. I don't want to do that. I guarantee you that lady didn't go home that night and say, I was debating the president of a think tank about the minimum wage policy, and he was making some very good points. That's not what she said. I guarantee you she went home and said to her husband, I was debating the president of the American Enterprise Institute on television tonight, and he's a jerk. And she wasn't wrong. That's an unforced error, as they say in baseball. And I know that when she sees my movie on Netflix or sees me on television or whatever, she says, there's that jerk, and I'm never going to get it back. I ruined a potential relationship. I hurt my reputation with one little roll of the eyes. That's what we're doing to our country. One remark at a time, one dismissal at a time, one sarcastic comment at a time. And you see the results, my friends. This is where we are as a country. Good news. It's that simple. I realize that we have ideological differences. We have major policy differences, but we can get over those things. What we can't get over is the unspoken statement that you're worthless and your ideas mean nothing. That's the habit we need to break. So, how do we break that habit? The habit of contempt. The answer to that is the same way we break any habit. 90 seconds of brain science, and that's all you're going to have to endure. All habits are processed by the brain in a tiny part of the brain evolved more than 1 million years ago called the nucleus accumbens. It's about the size of the end of your index finger. It's in your deep part of your brain near your amygdala. It's in your lizard brain. It's not conscious. What does it do? When you get something that gives you a reward, the nucleus accumbens stores the impulse and says, do that automatically again and again and again. And the more you do it, the stronger it gets. Now the problem is, the good thing about that is you have all kinds of good habits. 500,000 years ago, you'd know where the food is. You'd go there automatically. And you could use your conscious brain, your prefrontal cortex, for new decisions. The problem with the nucleus accumbens is when you make a bad habit, it's really hard to break. You can will it all you want, you can't break the habit. Now, for many years, I made my living as a classical musician. And my worst habit is I was a smoker. I didn't like being a smoker. I was ashamed of it. It was unhealthy. It was expensive. It made my mother sad. It had to stop. So I decided I was going to quit. I'm going to will that habit to stop. I said, I won't smoke. I won't smoke. I smoked again and again and again until I learned the secret to breaking a habit, which is to reprogram the nucleus accumbens. It's not easy, but it's simple. What you need to do is whenever you have any bad habit, you wait for the stimulus to do the bad thing, and then you stop. You simply stop. You give yourself time to do something else instead. Okay, now, the great Buddhist masters, they always said, you have to put time between stimulus and response so that you can be the master of yourself. That's what they're talking about. Don't let your automatic brain take over. Your mother, she was a Buddhist master. How do I know? She said, when you're angry, count to 10. Don't answer immediately. That's trying to not be enslaved by your nucleus accumbens. That's what your mother was saying. She didn't know she was saying that, but that's what she was saying. So if you're a smoker and you want to quit, wait till you want to smoke and then stop and instead have a drink. You heard it from a Harvard professor. All right. So if you have a habit now of answering people with contempt, which you probably do, and which I do too, you need to break that habit. How come? Because you're a leader. People look to leaders. People act like leaders. If you have a contempt habit, you need to break it right now if you want to bring that's the number one thing that you personally can do to bring this country back together again. Not to agree with things you disagree with. No. It's to stop being contemptuous. So how are you going to break the contempt habit? You have to wait until you feel it. And when do you feel contempt? Usually because somebody just treated you with contempt. Somebody rolled their eyes at you. Somebody said that something that you said was stupid. Right? That's when you want to express contempt. That's when you stop. When you're treated with contempt, you have to decide consciously to react in a different way. That's the answer. Where do we get the answer to that? Thinking about that a little bit. I was reading the good book. Got to the 5th chapter of the Gospel of St. Matthew, 44th verse. The most subversive verse in the New Testament. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. It's hard to do, isn't it? Why? Because that's to do battle with yourself. And by the way, that's not a Christian teaching. That's the teaching of every good religion. That's the teaching of all secular ethics. That's the teaching of all good leaders. That's not a strictly religious teaching. But it's a hard thing to do because it's fighting against this neurological tendency to just go with the flow, to do what feels right. I thought to myself, how do I do that? Can I think of a time when I was treated with hatred and I answered with love? And I thought of a time, and I want to share it with you. Because here's a psychological principle I want to share with you as well. If you want to do something, think of a time when you did it and how you felt. And just remember that feeling, and you'll automatically go back to the right behavior. So I thought of a time when I was treated with hatred, treated with contempt, and I answered with warm-heartedness, even a little bit of love, by accident. I'm not such a virtuous person. I'm no saint. But I'll tell you the story. It was in 2006. I was still a professor at Syracuse University. The best job in the world. I mean, I was beavering away in professorial obscurity. I was writing these books that nobody ever read because they were boring, all filled with math. I had graduate students who were motivated and nice. I had a good life. And then something happened in my life. Kind of good, kind of bad. You decide. I wrote a book that became a bestseller by accident. It was the same kind of boring stuff I always wrote, you know, the mathematical appendix and a lot of equations and data in it, right? But it hit the news cycle in just the right way. It was about charitable giving. And everybody, for some reason, was talking about charitable giving. And I had the ultimate treatise on who gives and who doesn't. President Bush called me. He asked me to come to the White House to brief him. I was on the front page of papers. I was on television, on the radio. My book was selling 1,000 copies a day, and my life changed overnight. From obscure college professor to pundit guy in like a week. It was very disconcerting, you know? And here's the weirdest part when your life changes like this. You start getting mail from people you've never met. Emails by the hundreds. See, when you have a book on the bestseller list and people read your book, they feel like they know you. And they talk to you like they know you. So, you know, people like the book. They would say, I want to tell you about my grandma. It's very personal. People would say, I didn't like your book, and so I don't like you, and I want to tell you why. That's weird, too. So about 2 months after the book comes out, people have read the book, and I'm getting dozens of emails a day from strangers. My email address was very easy to get. It was on the website of the university. And I got an email from a guy, I remember it distinctly, on a Wednesday or a Thursday afternoon, and in my office, it pops up from a guy in Texas. Here's what it said. Dear Professor Brooks, you are a right-wing fraud. That's a tough way to start email. But I'm a good sport. I'm reading all the email. I said, I'm going to read the whole email. And the first thing I noticed is this guy's email is 5,000 words long. It's going to take me 20 minutes to read it. But I'm plowing through it, digging through it. And I noticed that this guy's, he's tearing apart my book in great detail. I mean, every chapter, here's what's wrong with the data, here's what's wrong with your math, here's what's wrong with your conclusions, even little nitpicky stuff like, you know, the columns in table 3.1 are reversed, you moron. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I'm 2/3 through the email, and for some reason I become conscious of my emotions, right? You know, how would you be? You know, threatened, kind of mad, the whole thing. You know what I was feeling? He read my book. I was amazed. I mean, nobody had ever read my books before. I mean, my family didn't read my books. Nobody read my books, right? And so I said to myself, you know, I got nothing to lose. I'm going to write this guy and tell him what's written on my heart. I'll never meet him. So I wrote back, Dear so-and-so, I know you hated my book. I know you think it's terrible, and I'm terrible, and everything's terrible. You made that very clear. But you read every word, and it took me 2 years to write that book. I put my whole heart into it. I'm so grateful to you for your attention and your time. Thank you. Send. And then I go back to work, right? I'll never hear from that guy. Nope. 15 minutes later, ding, email comes back. I'm like, uh-oh. What's he going to want now? Maybe it's bad. He wants to kill me or something. I open it up. Dear Professor Brooks, the next time you're in Texas, if you want to get some dinner, give me a call. What happened? What happened? From enemy to friend in one short email. What? And I realized he didn't suddenly like the book. He still hated the book. He just realized he liked me. Because I sincerely thanked him for his time. I was actually grateful to him. I neutralized his ill will toward me by answering his hatred with a small expression of friendship, a little bit of brotherly love. That, my friends, is power in your hands. You know who possesses that power in abundance? Leaders. You, me. We get to do that. How many times have you blown that opportunity? I thought to myself, that's it. Now, by the way, I did not have dinner with that guy, because right now I'd probably be chained to a pipe in his basement. Right? Yeah. That's right. That's a little edgy for Tax Watch, I know, but still, we're all friends here, But it made me think. This is the chance that we've got, my friends. This is what we get to do. This is what we're put on earth to do, right? This is the adventure. Question is just doing it, right? Doing it. So I'm going to give you some assignments on how to do it. And these are assignments to me too. This is how I'm living my life. I'm going to give you some homework. And I get to do this because I'm a professor. So I'm going to give you homework now. And I want you to do your homework, right? If you want to do it and turn it in, that's fine. My email is easy to find now too, and I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to give you 3 assignments. Now, the first thing is not your assignment. So we'll call this assignment number 0. Here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to agree with people. Agreement leads to mediocrity in a competition of ideas. This is a country based on competition. We want competition in politics. That's called democracy. We hate uncontested elections, and we hate cooked elections even more. We hate uncompetitive economies. The free enterprise system is the greatest engine for lifting people up from the margins of society. Every single person in this room is a beneficiary of the capitalist system because of competition. And just as we believe in competition in economies and competition in politics, we need to believe in the competition of ideas. That means going hammer and tongs with the things that you think are right. People owe it to you to have the respect to tell you what you think, and you owe it to them to have the respect to tell them what you think. Do not agree. That's not your assignment. Here's the first assignment. Stand up to the people who would tell you that disagreement means that you have to hate someone. Disagreement does not mean you have to hate somebody. Disagreement means you have to have respect to say what you think. What am I talking about? I saw these data, encouraging data, by the way, that 93% of Americans hate how divided we've become as a country. 93%. That's so great. That's every single person in this room, by the way. The problem is that means 7% don't hate how divided we've become as a country. Who are they? That's the outrage industrial complex in America. Those are the people who are getting rich and powerful and famous, or just popular and getting readers or just clicks on the internet by driving us apart, setting us against each other. There's some people who really like the fact that there's a lot of hatred in this country. They think that hatred is warranted, or hatred is fun, or hatred is profitable. Remember, when you hate, somebody's getting rich, somebody's getting powerful, somebody's getting famous. Don't put up with it. Stand up, as you used to say in the 60s, stand up to the man. The outraged industrial complex in media and politics that wants to set you against your neighbor. How are you going to do it? Well, there's a bunch of people out there, you can think of them, that are trying to set person against person. Get a face in your head, it's wrong. That face in your head right now is somebody you already disagree with. Now think of somebody who agrees with you and says all of those forbidden things that you think. Right? Those are the people to turn off. Those are the people to block out. Don't watch that show. Don't read that column. Disregard that politician, because that person is profiting from your bad feelings. Stand up to the outraged industrial complex. That's assignment number 1. When leaders do that, people will follow. Assignment number 2. This is more important. Go find contempt and hatred and walk toward it. One of the things that my son, who's, as I mentioned before, is joining the military, is one of the things that they tell people who have contracts to become infantrymen, which my son is that he says, what if I'm afraid and I'm going into battle? He says, we train you not to be afraid. How? When there's gunfire, what do? You know what Marines do when there's gunfire? They walk toward it. How come? How come? Because if you're running away, you have no defense, right? If you're walking toward it, your barrel's walking toward it too, and you actually have defense. You're more likely to get hurt if you avoid gunfire than if you walk toward it. Now, that's hard to do. That violates all of our assumptions and all of our tendencies and all of our instincts to walk toward the fire. But the same principle is true in an economy of contempt. Walk toward it. You're more likely to be able to deal with it, and more importantly, you're going to actually get to your opportunity for moral perfection. Why? Because when you see hatred, that's your entrepreneurial opportunity to show love. I have a lot of missionaries in my family, both sides of my family, a lot of missionaries. I've known a lot of missionaries in my life, and I love and admire them because they're so good at taking rejection. It's amazing. You know words that have never been uttered in any language? Oh, good, there's missionaries on the porch. Like, never, right? It's always like, pretend we're not home, right? And yet, you meet missionaries, they're full of happiness, they're full of love. Why? You ask them, you know what they say? I have something people need. I am empowered to bring the truth and the light to people. So beautiful, right? So even in spite of the rejection, in point of fact, because of the rejection, they can find the source of life within themselves. That's not just a religious concept, my friends. That's all of us, if we're trying to heal the nation with what's good and true and right. We are missionaries for love in the face of hate, if we choose to be so. So that means you got to go on looking for it. You got to go searching for it. And if you're not finding enough people who disagree with you, you need more friends. You need to go out more. You need to widen your circle of acquaintances. You need to be more courageous in your conversations. And every time somebody treats you with contempt because of something ideological, something political, some hot topic, say, thank you. Now's my opportunity. Now's my opportunity to answer that contempt with warm-heartedness. And in so doing, to neutralize that conflict. Why? Because what are the benefits? Remember, nobody's ever been insulted into agreement. If you answer hatred with love, you will be persuasive, maybe for the first time in a long time. You will become a happier person. You have my guarantee. I'm a social scientist. I study this stuff. I got the data. When you answer hatred with love, you will become happier. You have a chance at making the other person happier. Remember my interlocutor from Texas who's still waiting for me to go out to dinner. And you won't solve our country's problem, but you'll be the beginning of the solution. Persuasion, your happiness, her happiness, the beginning of the solution to our problem in America. That's a quadruple win by walking toward contempt. Finally, and here's maybe the most important assignment of all, we need to express more gratitude. You know, I was talking to a big conclave of Republican politicians in Washington, D.C., and I asked them a question. I said, how many of you wish we lived in a one-party state, like Venezuela, Cuba? No hands, of course. Doesn't matter if they were Republicans or Democrats, by the way. No hands anyplace, and no hearts. Nobody wants to live in a one-party state. I said, how many of you are grateful that we have a multi-party, at least two-party democracy? All the hands, right? I said, you just told me that you're grateful for the other side. Oh, well, that's a sleight of hand. No, it's not. It's true. If you're grateful to live in a country where we can disagree, you're grateful for the people with whom you disagree. Gratitude is appropriate in this great country. How many times have we neglected to show our gratitude simply to be in a country where we can disagree, where we have a competition of ideas? We do it all the time. It's like, hate this. Don't hate this. Be thankful for it. And that's magic. You know, there's this great book that you all read and forgot called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's a great book. It sounds like a guide on how to bend people to your will, but it's not. It's a guide to moral living. Read it again. Dale Carnegie, he's traveling all over the country looking for the most successful people and asking them their secrets to their personal success. There's one chapter where he's in New York City talking to Howard Thurston, the world's greatest magician, called the world's greatest performer. And he wants to see for himself why he's this so well-regarded, beloved performer. And he goes to a performance, and afterward, he goes to the dressing room. He says, Mr. Thurston, I know your secret. He said, oh, really? What's my secret? He says, I know why you're the world's greatest performer. Not because of the tricks. I mean, they were pretty standard tricks. Saw a lady in half and rabbits out of hats. That's not it. He said, it's because you loved it as much as the audience. You made it look like the very first night. How did you do it? 40 years, 8 shows a week. How do you make it look like that? He said, Howard Thurston says, that's simple. When I'm in my dressing room before I go out every night, I say a little prayer. I say, I am truly grateful to be doing this job, something that I love. I'm grateful for the people in those seats who make it possible for me to do something that I love. And then before he would hit the stage, he'd be at the footlights, and he would say to himself under his breath, I love my audience. I love my audience. When was the last time that you expressed appropriate gratitude for the blessings that you have in your life? For your job, for your citizenship, for your country, to yourself, my friends, and to others. When was the last time you were appropriately grateful for the benefits that we have in this country? That's a game changer. When you show that gratitude to the people with whom you disagree, to live in a country where we can disagree, that will neutralize ill will and make it possible to have a competition of ideas that's actually productive. That is an engine of unity. And it starts with you, and it will make you happier. There's a great study from the University of California, Santa Barbara that's in my mind right now about this psychologist. They take these kids, these undergraduate students, they break them into 2 groups like a drug test. The first half has to make a list of the things they're most grateful for, 5 things. The second has to make a list of current events. Now, each day you look at your list for 5 minutes, and on Sundays you update your lists. At the end of 10 weeks, the gratitude listers, 25% happier than the current events listers. That is therapy, and it's free, and you need to do it, right? And on the top of your list should be, I am grateful to be a leader in the greatest country in the world where I can disagree with no knock in the night. And I'm going to express that more often. That will be seen as a mark of true leadership, and it will bring our country together again. One last comment, and then I get to turn it over. I don't know, is the governor here yet? The governor here, not here yet, so I'm going to go on for another hour. Yeah. So I got some things to say, my friends. I mentioned that my admiration that I have for missionaries, I know many of you do too. It's funny, I was actually doing the commencement address at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, which is the flagship university for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And I was talking about this, and I said, it's just the admiration that I have for missionaries. I said, I was talking to a group of 22,000 people at their graduation ceremony, the Marriott Pavilion. And I said, how many of you know missionaries, right? And all the hands, 22,000 hands go up, and I realized, yes, Mormons. That's right, I forgot. When I said that we have the opportunity to be like missionaries, this is no joke, right? I mean, who do people admire the most? They admire leaders. They admire successful people. They admire, in a nutshell, you. When you exhibit the behavior that you want to see in this country, you're going to have disproportionate impact. You're going to have, as we say in business, leverage. So here's what I want you to think about. Remember, the idea is look for opportunities to answer hatred in America with love, with thanksgiving, with gratitude, with warm-heartedness. And so I want to put an image in your head so you don't forget. And here's the image because it's in my head. My wife and I, we teach marriage preparation for couples that are engaged. It's called pre-Cana in the Catholic Church. And once a month, we get 30 couples in a local Catholic retreat center that are going through their marriage training before the priest will marry them. And my wife and I, we get up and we have this long seminar about, how to stay married and stay in love, and it's super fun. I love it. I mean, it's the best. And I run into these couples in airports, and I say, some of them are like, yeah, we decided not to get married, but generally speaking, they're pretty good outcomes. And And we teach them things like, the principles of gratitude, et cetera, and how great it is to have a life where you can have this, marriages that are successful. But I was, remarking to my wife one time about how much I loved teaching this. We were in this Catholic retreat center, and as we were leaving the retreat center, we noticed a sign over the door. It wasn't a sign over the door when you go into the retreat center. It was a sign after you've been praying in this retreat center, going out. So people who've been praying, who are going out to the parking lot, right? And you know what the sign said? You are now entering mission territory. I thought to myself, that's good advice. Not for religious reasons, for all of us. So if you're armed and ready on the basis of my remarks and what's written in your heart about wanting to be more persuasive and wanting to be happier and to bring more happiness and to start to bring this country back together again, and you're willing to go on this mission with me, if you're going to be warriors for this as well as I am, what I want you to remember when you leave this room today, I want you to pretend that the sign is over the door. Because when you leave Tax Watch, you're going to be smarter, you're going to be better prepared to get better public policy. For sure, you expected that. But you're also, because of your love for each other and for the love for this country, when you leave this conference, when you leave this room, you're going to be entering mission territory. For what you're doing, for this great state, for the example you're making for this country, for what you're doing for each other, and for the good that you're going to do in the years that come. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. We got Q&A? All right. Okay, yeah, sure. Okay. So we're going to do Q&A until the governor gets here, and then, is that right?
We have 4 minutes till the governor gets here. So if we have a question for Professor Brooks, a question from the audience.
Remember, we're not killing time. We're just having Q&A. Yes, sir.
Robert, you want to take that half? I'll take this half.
Yeah.
Do we have a question?
Yeah, we got a question right over on this side here, right here. And then we'll come over to this side. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
So, Arthur, my name is Jack. I consider myself a changed man thanks to you.
Thank you, sir.
I want to ask about babies.
About what?
Babies.
I love them. I'm very pro-baby. Yeah.
Are you sure you're not in politics? So we have 4.4 million babies born in the United States every year, 11,600 a day. And it's my opinion as a child developmentalist, they have to learn to love. And they have to learn to love by the behavior of those around them. So now that you're one of my gurus, I would like to hear you talk about what is the best strategy for teaching babies how to learn to love, and then teaching us how to learn to love other people's babies.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So early childhood development is a huge area of research, and it's a very technical area of research. But a lot of it boils down to some common sense principles. That really, I'm a social scientist, but I don't need to be a social scientist to understand that the number one way that children are brought up in an environment of love is to have parents in love. That's it, my friend. Now, not everybody can have that. I get it. Not everybody can have that. But to the extent that you want children to be brought up in an environment of love, the number one thing that we can do is to make the environment for happy couples that stay together. Married people who love each other, that's the best single ecosystem. Again, not everybody can have it. Not all of you had it. My wife didn't have it. My father-in-law took off when she was a kid, and it was terrible. It took years to forgive him. I'm telling you. But she knows as well as I do that people in love are the way that you model love for everybody else. Now, here's why I'm freaking out about this a little bit. I'm going to tell you why I'm afraid, because that sounds so simple. Here's why it's not. People in their 20s today are 1/3 less likely to be in love than when I was in my 20s. You know this? The likelihood of going out on a date when you're 19 years old is 30 percentage points lower than when I was 19 years old. Something is happening in our culture that's driving people apart from the most fundamental building block type of love, the most powerful type of love that anybody's ever going to experience, which is romantic love. Something's tearing us apart, and I think it's a culture of fear that's doing that. And so what do we need? We need an entrepreneurial culture where people are willing to take risks. You know, you're all entrepreneurs. You know that the ultimate entrepreneurial act, you know what it is? It's your life. Your life is the ultimate startup venture. And the most entrepreneurial thing you're going to do is to put all of your heart at risk, which is what entrepreneurs do, and that's by falling in love. I made this point in a speech about a year ago, and I was on Capitol Hill, and you know, Capitol Hill is the most dysfunctional dating market in the world. You know, you talk to these young guys, and you say, you know, so how long have you been going out with that girl? And they say, like, 8 years. It's like, and then they'll ask, what do you think I should do? And it's like, I know exactly what you should do, you know? Don't keep dating for 8 more years. I mean, get down on one knee, man. I mean, that's basically the best advice. They don't take it. And so I gave a speech where I talked about the startup life and the startup heart. And to do this, because love is so critically important, because romantic love is so critically important. You're an entrepreneur or not, bottom line. And about 2 weeks after the speech, a guy comes up to me on a plane. He says, are you Dr. Brooks? And I said, yeah. He said, I heard you give that speech on Capitol Hill about living a startup life by falling in love, and I can't get it out of my head. And I said, yeah? I'm getting kind of nervous now. He says, I'm on my way right now to declare my love to a woman that I've been in love with secretly for 2 years, and I've never had the courage to tell her. And I'm going to go tell her because of you. And I said, it's only a speech. Right? And then... And I gave him my email address. I said, come on, don't keep me hanging here. I didn't hear from him. 2 months go by, and I see him in Washington, D.C. at a party, Christmas party. So I go running up to him, because his images, but his face is burned into my brain. I go running up to him. I said, remember me? And he said, yes. I said, tell me what happened. And he said, she shot me down. I said, I'm so sorry. I was very contrite. He said, no. I've been meaning to reach out to you to thank you. I said, why? He said, because that was literally the thing I was most afraid of happening in my life. And it happened, and I didn't die. He's a changed man because he took the chance to fall in love. If you want more love, you need to give more love. This is the iron law of attraction. Give what you want to get. If you want your children to be brought up in more love, give more love and model it more. If you want a society where people are brought up in love, you need it more around us. And this is where it starts with the family. And it starts not with some policy. It starts with what's written on our hearts. I believe we are finished because the governor is here.
Yes,
God
sir.
bless you all.
Professor Brooks, thank you so much.